She was just a child fixing his car. But the ring on her finger belonged to his dead wife. Asterisk, asterisk. On a dusty roadside in rural Georgia, a little black girl no older than 10 kneels beside a broken-down '67 Mustang. A wealthy, bitter millionaire watches in disbelief as she tightens a bolt with steady hands. Then he freezes. On her tiny finger glints a ring, one he buried with his wife 5 years ago. Who is this child? Asterisk, asterisk. If this story touches your heart, if you believe in fate, in love that transcends time, and the small miracles that come from unexpected places, we invite you to subscribe. Every story we tell is filled with warmth, healing, and hope, just like the one you're about to witness. You're not just watching a video, you're joining a family. Asterisk, asterisk. Absolutely. Here's an expanded, cinematic, and emotionally rich continuation of your story based on The Girl and the Mustang. The narrative will flow without headings, weaving a heartfelt, slow-burn tale full of character, mystery, and healing. Below begins the long-form version. The Georgia sun hung like a silent sentinel above the winding back road, its golden weight pressing into the cracked asphalt. Heat shimmered off the hood of the '67 Mustang, rising in waves that blurred the line between reality and memory. The car hissed and sputtered, coughing like an old man on his final mile. Travis Langford stood beside it, arms crossed, sweat tracing down his temples, pooling at the collar of his white linen shirt. His shoes, custom Italian leather, were coated in red clay dust. His watch, limited edition, titanium, on despite the digital silence of the phone in his hand. No signal, no internet. Just the winding rural road that had seemed so charming when he turned off the interstate. Looking for silence, not knowing silence would be so absolute, he leaned on the car's frame, arms trembling from a mix of exhaustion and frustration. The Mustang had been his pride once, a gift from his wife, a symbol of their shared past before everything unraveled. It had been stored away for years, untouched, until this morning when something inside him, maybe grief, maybe guilt, him to drive, to leave the city, to run. He had no destination in mind, only the echo of her voice. The memory of green eyes and that soft laugh that used to fill their home like sunlight. The engine had clunked and wheezed outside this sleepy, nowhere town, and here he was. No mechanics, no neighbors in sight, just the thrum of cicadas and the mournful sigh of a summer wind. Then he heard it, a voice, soft, curious, like the breeze itself. Had learned to speak. Need help, Mr. He turned, half expecting to see a figment of his heat-struck mind, but there she was, a little girl, maybe 9 or 10, brown-skinned, sun-kissed and glowing, her hair tied into 2 wild, defiant puffs that bounced as she stepped closer, a rusty red toolbox in hand. Her denim overalls were stained with grease, a patch stitched over one knee. She wore no shoes, just calloused feet that suggested she was no stranger to gravel roads. Travis blinked. What I said, you need help. Looks like she's overheating, the girl said, pointing to the car like she'd seen 100 of them break down before. He laughed, half out of confusion, half from the sheer absurdity of it all. You know anything about cars? She gave him a look, one of those dry, unimpressed stares that children and old women seem to perfect. I know Mustangs, my mama taught me. Before he could respond, she had already placed a toolbox on the ground with a soft thunk and stood on tiptoe to peer inside the hood. Her hands moved with purpose, testing, adjusting, feeling the metal like it was an old friend. Her brow furrowed with focus. Travis found himself watching her, first with disbelief, then curiosity, then something harder to name. She wasn't pretending she knew her way around an engine. Every movement was practiced, almost ritualistic, like she had been doing this her whole life. And then, as her small fingers reached for a bolt near the engine's edge, the sun caught a glint on her hand. His heart, stuttered. No, it couldn't be. On her left hand, just loose enough to slide past her second knuckle, was a ring, a delicate emerald set in a faded gold band, surrounded by 2 thin, twisted vines carved into the metal, one of a kind, custom-made in Spain. He remembered the day he gave it to her. Alina, he whispered. The girl looked up. His voice cracked. Where did you get that ring? She looked down at her hand. Confused for a moment, she spun the ring on her finger absently. My mama gave it to me, she said. Said it used to belong to someone special. Travis felt the blood drain from his face. His legs nearly gave out. He leaned on the car for support, breath coming shallow. What was your mother's name? He asked, already terrified of the answer. The girl hesitated. Her eyes searched his face, as if trying to figure out if he was dangerous or maybe just broken. Alina, she finally said. Alina Rose. The world tilted. Alina Rose. The name hit him like a freight train. She had vanished 5 years ago. Just gone, no accident, no goodbye, just a single letter, no return address, telling him she had to disappear, that it wasn't safe anymore. He had thought it a mental break, some trauma she never told him about. For years, he tried everything: investigators, private detectives, even bribes. Nothing. It was like she had been erased. And now this girl, this daughter, your mama, he said slowly, the words tasting foreign in his mouth. Is she here? Is she alive? The girl's face turned somber. She nodded once, then added softly, she was, but she passed. Last year cancer. A silence fell, deeper than before. He felt like the air had been punched from his lungs. Everything inside him crumbled. In its place, a hollow ache bloomed. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. The girl shrugged, not with indifference, but with the quiet strength of a child who had learned too early how to carry grief. She said not to be sad, that she'd see me again in the stars. Travis sank down beside the car, sitting in the dirt like a man finally surrendering to the truth. His hands shook. The girl sat beside him, her toolbox between them. She told me stories about a man, the girl said after a moment. Said he used to build things from nothing, that he had a loud laugh and liked old cars. She never said your name, but Travis tried to speak, but no words came. Just a dry croak. I used to dream about him, she said, her voice so soft, it almost vanished in the wind. A man who drove a green Mustang and had sad eyes. His breath caught. My name's Travis, he said. Langford. She looked at him, then nodded. Yeah, that was the name on the envelope, the one she never mailed. He stared at her. What's your name? June. He smiled through the sting in his chest. June Rose. She nodded. Again, Dottie blinked away tears. She always loved the name June, said it felt like the start of something. For a long time they sat in silence. The sun began to dip, casting long shadows across the dirt road. Fireflies blinked into existence. Somewhere in the trees, a mockingbird sang. Eventually, June stood and opened the back of the Mustang, rummaging until she found a small canister of water. She poured it into the engine carefully, like she'd done it a dozen times before. She'd be okay now, she said. Just overheated, he nodded, barely hearing. His world had shifted off its axis. The pain he'd buried, the anger, the confusion, it all began to melt. In its place was something new, fragile, uncertain, but unmistakably there. Hope. Double quotes. Do you live far? He asked. She pointed down the road. Not too far. I walk it sometimes. Can I walk with you? She looked at him for a long time, searching his face again. Then she nodded. Together, they walked down that winding Georgia road. The cicadas sang their songs, and above them the first stars began to peek through the velvet dusk. She told him about her favorite trees, the pond where frogs liked to hide, the place her mama used to sit and braid her hair. He listened like a starving man at a feast. When they reached the house, a weathered cabin nestled in wildflowers, he saw photos. On the windowsill, photos of Alina, older, wiser, radiant, even in grainy Polaroids, and in one of them her arms wrapped around a tiny baby with June's same eyes. There, on a dusty old table, lay a letter addressed to him. His hands trembled as he opened it. Travis, if you're reading this, then fate finally did its job. I never stopped loving you. I only left to protect June. I wish I had the strength to tell you sooner, but now, she needs you. And maybe, just maybe, you need her too. Please don't let her grow up without knowing who she is. And don't let yourself forget who you were with us. He folded the letter with care, tucked it into his chest pocket. When he looked at June, she was staring at him, her eyes full of questions. And for the first time in years, he had answers. He knelt down and reached out his hand. I think, he said gently, I'm your daddy. Her face didn't change right away. Then her bottom lip trembled, and she ran into his arms. He held her like he was holding his entire world. And just like that, in the fading glow of day, a broken man and a lost girl began the long journey home, not by distance but by heart. The girl paused, looked down at her hand, where the ring had caught his eye like a spark in the gloom. She turned it slightly with her thumb, as if suddenly noticing it herself. A pause lingered between them, hanging in the thick Georgia air, as quiet and fragile as breath. It was a gift, she said softly, barely above a whisper. Travis blinked, his body still. His mouth opened, but the words stumbled out like he had forgotten how to speak. From who? The girl's shoulders rose, then dropped, as if the question tugged at something heavy inside her. She looked up at him, meeting his gaze with calm eyes that held far too much experience for someone so young. My mama, before she passed. His chest tightened, not just from what she said, but how she said it, with that weightless, practiced sadness, the kind only people who'd carried grief long enough could wear like second skin. He took a half step back, and another. His legs felt hollow, as if whatever was keeping him upright had started to give way. The ring, it couldn't be. He had watched the funeral. He had placed it himself. That tiny emerald ring, on her finger, sealed the casket, lowered her body into the earth with it. He remembered how cold her hand had felt in his, how her skin had paled beneath the gold. He remembered falling apart right there in the rain, alone, burying the one person he had trusted with every part of himself. The ring was gone, buried, entombed with her memory. It was not something that could simply reappear on a child's finger years later like a trick of fate. And yet here it was, its distinct twisted gold vines, the sharp emerald glint, the same scratch on the band from when she dropped it on their honeymoon. He stared harder, almost angrily, as if the force, what his disbelief could make it vanish, make this moment make sense. Desperation surged. What was your mother's name? She hesitated, her hand curled into a fist, then she said it. So quiet it felt like the trees themselves leaned in to hear. Alina. Travis swayed. It was like the name had been waiting to be spoken aloud again. And now that it had, the silence it left behind was too big to fill. He staggered backward again, one hand clutching the hood of the Mustang for balance, the other pressed to his chest as if his heart had just forgotten what to do. It didn't make sense. Alina had no children. That's what everyone believed. That's what he believed. They had tried for years: doctor visits, fertility clinics, late-night arguments turning to tears, then silence. The silence was always the worst part. It stretched like wallpaper over the cracks in their marriage. Then came the change. She grew distant. Not cruel, not cold, just quieter. She began to disappear emotionally before she vanished physically. When she left, he thought it was the pressure, the disappointment. He thought it broke her. But now, looking at this little girl, this quiet, sharp-eyed child with a ring on her finger and the name of his dead wife on her lips, he began to realize that everything he thought he knew had been a lie. He took a breath, then another, but it didn't help. The world still felt wrong. The colors too bright, the shadows too long. He looked down at her again. "Alina Rose?" he asked. She nodded, and something inside him cracked. He saw her again, Elaine, in flashes. The way she used to smile in the morning before brushing her teeth. The way she curled into his side at night, always with one leg tangled in the sheets. The way she used to hum when she cooked, even when she burned everything. The way she looked at him on their wedding day like he was something more than the sum of his parts. He remembered the day she vanished. The note, just a few short lines. "I need to go. Don't look for me. I love you. I always will. E." No explanation, no return address, just silence, and then, eventually, death. They told him she'd been in a car crash in Tennessee, unrecognizable. The ring was recovered from the wreckage, identified, returned. "But now, where's your mama now?" he asked, barely managing the words. The girl looked down at the ground, her fingers curled around the edge of her overall pocket. "She's gone," she said. "Last year, got sick real fast, couldn't walk. One day, then couldn't breathe the next. I tried everything, prayed real hard, but she said it was time, said I'd be okay." Travis felt something inside him shatter. He didn't even know her, this girl, but the ache of knowing that Alina had been alive, had lived long enough to raise a child, to mother her through scraped knees and bedtime stories and birthday cakes, and he hadn't known. He hadn't been there. A new kind of guilt settled in his gut, not just for Alina, but for the child she left behind, his child. "How old are you?" he asked, voice shaking. "9," she said, "but almost 10, 9. He did the math. His brain refused it at first, tried to reject it, like oil refusing to mix with water. 9 years ago, Alina had left him. 10 years ago, a year before the supposed crash, before the casket, before the burial. She had been pregnant when she disappeared. She left because of the baby. His breath caught in his throat. Everything began to rearrange itself in his mind. She didn't leave because she stopped loving him. She left because she was protecting something, or someone. "Why?" he whispered, more to the wind than to her. "Why? What?" she asked. "Why didn't she tell me?" The girl didn't answer, not immediately. Her eyes shifted away, following the line of the road back toward the trees. There was a long pause before she said, "She was scared." He nodded slowly, bitterly. He knew the feeling well. "She told me stories, sometimes," the girl continued, "about a man who was really smart and really sad, who built things out of nothing, but forgot how to be happy. She said he had the kindest hands but the heaviest heart." Travis closed his eyes. "She never said your name, but she kept your picture in a box under the floorboard with this ring. That did it." He turned away, pressing a hand to his face as the tears came. He wasn't a man who cried, not publicly, not often, but this broke him open, like glass under pressure. Everything he'd buried, the loss, the confusion, the unbearable silence came rushing out. The girl didn't move. She just stood there, still as the air, letting him have his moment. When he turned back, eyes red, she looked at him differently, not with fear, not even confusion, but with something deeper. Empathy, the kind of understanding you shouldn't have at her age. "What's your name?" she asked. The question struck him like a lightning bolt. He realized he hadn't introduced himself. "Travis," he said, clearing his throat. "Langford." She tilted her head. "Langford," she repeated, like it tasted familiar. "That's what was written on the back of the photo." He smiled, sadly. "Yeah. I used to be somebody once." "You still are," she said. The words were simple, but they struck him to the core. He wasn't sure why. "What's your name?" he asked in return. "June," she said. "June Rose." He laughed quietly, through the lingering remnants of grief. "Alina always loved the name June. Said it felt like the start of something." She smiled. "She said that to me too." Something shifted between them then. A space closed, a bridge formed, two islands reaching out to each other after a storm had long passed. "June," he repeated, "I think we should talk. About a lot of things." She nodded, not quite smiling but not afraid either. "We should go," she said. "It's getting dark. You can come to the house. I'll show you the photo and the letters." He nodded. As they began to walk down the gravel path together, side by side, he couldn't help but glance at her again. the way she moved, the way she studied the sky, the way her fingers twisted the ring absent-mindedly when she was deep in thought. It was Alina, she was in there. And for the first time in years, Travis didn't feel lost. He felt like he was finally coming home. Would you like me to continue this into the full 5,000-word story? This current section is roughly 1,300 words. I can continue directly, adding depth, flashbacks, and tension leading into the cabin reveal, an emotional climax. Let me know how you'd like to proceed. The girl paused, looked at her hand, then back at Travis. It was a gift, she said softly. From who? My mama, before she passed. Travis staggered back, memories flooding in. That ring had been sealed in a casket. He'd made sure. Desperation clawed at him. What was your mother's name? She hesitated, then whispered Alina. The name shattered him. His wife's name, but she had died without children, or so he thought. Travis stumbled a step away, like someone had punched him in the gut. The girl just stood there, blinking at him, her small hands resting at her sides, one of them still glinting with that impossible emerald ring. The wind had quieted, the trees frozen in that heavy, summer silence when even the insects paused, their buzzing, as if the world itself was holding its breath. He stared at her eyes, wide and patient, at the shape of her jaw, the gentle curve of her nose, and suddenly he saw it. Not right away, but once he saw it, he couldn't unsee it. A shadow of Alina in the girl's face. The tilt of her chin, the softness of her gaze. It was there woven into the child like a whisper in a familiar song. Travis opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came. His throat was thick with emotion, and the air in his lungs burned like fire. It couldn't be. It just couldn't. He had buried Alina 5 years ago, in a small white coffin lined with ivory silk. He remembered the casket, remembered the smell of lilies, remembered lowering it into the cold, hard earth. He had placed the ring on her finger with trembling hands, watched them close the lid. He had cried like a child beside that grave, after the mourners left and the earth swallowed her. Later that day, Travis followed her down a dirt path shaded by towering oaks and whispering pines, his heart thudding in his chest as if every step toward that modest sunlit cabin would somehow undo the years that had been lost. The afternoon light painted the grass gold, and fireflies had already begun to flicker around the edges of the field, dancing between tall stalks of wildflowers that swayed like they remembered her. Alina, the breeze carried the scent of something faintly, sweet honeysuckle, maybe, and for a moment the entire world felt suspended between dream and memory. The cabin appeared slowly through the clearing, nestled at the edge of a small grove where the wild grew quiet and respectful. It was plain, whitewashed, with a slanted roof and a wooden porch that had seen decades of sun and storm. A single rocking chair sat at the far end, with a patchwork quilt draped over its back. The railing was wrapped in ivy. Everything about it was humble, lived in, real. June walked ahead of him, bare feet brushing the earth with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged there, who knew every creak of the floorboards and every secret hiding place in the trees nearby. He watched her with reverence. She didn't know what it meant to him yet, what she was to him, but he did, and that knowledge weighed on him with both guilt and gratitude. He hesitated at the steps, suddenly unsure whether he had the right to enter this sacred space. But she turned and gave him a nod, the smallest smile pulling at the corner of her mouth. She pushed the screen door open, and it creaked with that same familiar, lived-in sound, the sound of home. The inside of the cabin was dim at first, the windows soft with gauzy curtains that filtered the light into long slanting beams. Dust floated in the golden air. The floor was worn pine, creaking softly beneath their steps. There was no television, no hum of electronics, just the ticking of an old clock on the mantel and the rustle of the wind slipping between the cracks in the window frames. He stepped inside, and immediately felt something shift in his chest. There were photos everywhere, pinned to the walls with yellowed tape, arranged on the mantel beside a jar of dried lavender, tucked into the edges of a cracked mirror. Some were black and white, others sun-bleached with time, and they were all of Helena, not the Elena he had buried in his memory, frozen in youth and perfection, but a real, aging woman, laughing at something off-camera, or stirring a pot on a wood stove, her hair tied back in a scarf, sitting in the grass with June in her lap, both of them grinning with teeth and sunburns and joy. She had been alive for years, and in those years she had lived. Travis's legs almost gave out beneath him. He sank onto the edge of an old couch, his hands covering his mouth as he tried to process the unthinkable. Alina hadn't died when he thought she had. She hadn't just run from him. She had created a whole life, hidden, yes, but full. And, most painful of all, she had done it without him. On a small wooden table, beneath a vase of pressed wildflowers, lay a single envelope, a little faded, a little worn, but his name was written on the front in a hand he would know anywhere. He reached for it with trembling fingers. Travis, just that dot, nothing else, no address, no date, just his name, floating in the center of the paper like it had waited all these years for his hands. He opened it slowly. The paper inside was creased, the ink a little smudged at the edges, like it had been held and reread 100 times before, being tucked away, Travis, if you're reading this, it means fate finally did its job. I don't know how long it's been. Maybe a year, maybe a lifetime. I never stopped thinking of you. I left to protect our daughter from the world, from the threats tied to your name. Do you remember when the glass on our front door shattered? The night you told me everything, the lawsuit, the blackmail, the threats. I remember how your hands shook when you held mine, how you still tried to smile. I was already pregnant then. I knew, but I hadn't told you yet. I was scared. Not of the baby, never of her, but of what it would mean, what it would make you give up, what it would make her inherit. I couldn't bring a child into that world, so I ran. I thought I'd come back. I thought you'd find me. I prayed you wouldn't. When the crash happened and they thought it was me, I let them. It was the only way to disappear completely. I kept your ring. I kept your picture. I kept every letter you ever wrote, but most of all, I kept the part of you that mattered most. June, she's everything I wanted to be and everything you never stopped being. Brave, gentle, strong. I raised her the best I could. I told her the world was beautiful and cruel and worth loving anyway. I taught her to fix engines and speak softly and stand tall. I told her stories about a man who built things from nothing, a man who once bought a cabin in Tennessee just because I said the trees there felt like they were listening, a man who left notes in my lunchbox every single day for 3 years, even after we were married. I never told her your name, but she's always known now she needs her father. She needs someone who knows where she came from and who can show her where she's going, and maybe you need her too. I hope you do. By the time he finished reading, the tears were falling freely, landing on the paper in quiet drops that blurred the words but couldn't erase them. The letter trembled in his hands as he brought it slowly to his chest and held it there like a wound that had finally found its name. He didn't know how long he sat there. The clock on the mantel ticked forward, indifferent to his grief, to the way the world had turned inside out in a single afternoon. Then he felt it, small fingers curling gently into his own. He looked down. June stood beside him, her eyes searching his face. "You knew my mama?" she asked, her voice soft and unsure. He nodded slowly. His voice came out rough and cracking, broken in all the places it hadn't been used in years. "Yes, I knew her." She hesitated, then looked away. "People didn't come around much. Mama didn't like visitors, but she talked about you sometimes. Not like a real person, more like a feeling." He swallowed hard. What kind of feeling? June thought about it, her brow furrowing slightly, like something that hurt but also made her smile, like music or fire. Travis laughed, one sharp and quiet, and the sound felt foreign coming out of him. "She used to say I had your eyes," June said. "You do," he replied, "and more." June looked up at him again, and then quietly she asked, "Are you my daddy?" He dropped to his knees, the letter falling to the floor beside him. He reached out slowly, unsure, afraid to spook her, to ruin the moment, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she took a step forward, then another, and before he knew it, her arms were around his neck, her head against his shoulder. "I think so," he whispered, "sweetheart. I think I'm your daddy." She nodded against his shoulder like she'd known all along. "I always wanted to." "No," she murmured. He held her tighter, not too tight, just enough to let her know he was real, that he wasn't going anywhere. The room around them faded. The grief, the guilt, the years, none of it mattered in that moment. Only this, a broken man and a brave little girl, stitched back together by the woman who loved them both enough to sacrifice everything. They stayed there, on the cabin floor, until the sun dipped low behind the trees and shadows stretched across the walls. Later, June showed him the treehouse out back she had helped Alina build. She showed him the old barn where she kept a box of broken car parts to tinker with. They made dinner together, eggs and toast and strawberries, and she talked about the neighbors who had helped her, how she kept the place clean, how she missed her mother's voice the most at night, and when it got dark, she asked if he would stay. He said yes. He didn't sleep much that night. He sat on the old rocking chair with the patchwork quilt over his lap, staring at the stars. Through the open porch, the hum of crickets filling the silence, he thought about Alina, about the years they lost, about the second chance she had given him in the shape of a little girl with wide eyes and a stubborn streak. And as the night deepened, something inside him shifted. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a man who had been abandoned or betrayed or broken. He felt like a man with a future, with a daughter. And as the wind stirred the leaves and the stars blinked down like distant promises, Travis Langford made himself a vow he would give June every day he had left, because love wasn't what you felt, it was what you did.